This is how two Canary Islands move cars, freight, supplies and people from one to the other, 6.5 hours across the open Atlantic. And anyone with a ticket can come along for the ride. Welcome on board VOLCÁN de Tamadaba. It is December 6th, 2025 and today the crossing runs from Arrecife to Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. The drive to the ferry terminal opens the day and boarding gets us on board for a closer look at the ship. There is time for a walk through the passenger areas, the lounges and the outside decks. The crossing first follows the coast of Lanzarote, then the route passes Fuerteventura and the Bocaina Strait, before heading out into open Atlantic water. For those who prefer a completely pure crossing, the full version is available in the Just Ferries members area, along with some extra shots and details. After the short intro, the journey begins. Another day in paradise, at least for a ferry enthusiast. The morning drive to the ferry terminal in Arrecife runs through a kind of landscape that very few islands can offer. Lanzarote is one of the oldest of the Canary Islands, around 15 million years above the surface. And the lava fields that shape so much of the eastern coast are the result of eruptions that happened only 300 years ago. The contrast is part of the island's character. Old underneath, young on top. Like almost all ferry trips on this channel, this one was booked online from home. The Naviera Armas website handles the process without much fuss. Choose the date, select the route, add the car, and the ticket arrives by email shortly afterwards. For one passenger and a car, the fare comes in at 138 euros, taxes included. The signs to the port are functional, but they do not exactly hold your hand. A little attention is required. Spanish ferry terminals often have a slightly fortress-like quality with fences, walls, and the general atmosphere of a place that takes access control rather seriously. Parking is only allowed in the designated areas, supervised by the Policia Portuaria. They are the port police responsible for order and security inside the port area. They run things here with a certain administrative confidence, which is the polite way of saying that warm welcomes are not part of the standard service catalogue. Ferry terminals farther north tend to be a little more cheerful about your arrival. Here you are tolerated, processed and eventually waved through. For reasons that are not entirely obvious, Naviera Armas now asks me to go into the office. It may have something to do with the rental car, or it may simply be one of those small administrative moments that ferry travel occasionally provides. Either way, I receive another ticket, and after that there is nothing left to do but wait. Boarding starts with the freight. Trucks and trailers go first, which says quite a lot about the character of this crossing, at least in the off-season. Passengers may be welcome here, but freight appears to be doing the serious work. There is not much to do here. Apart from the toilets, there are no real passenger facilities in the waiting area. So when boarding finally begins, it feels like a welcome development. What I like here is the logic of the loading. Traffic for the upper vehicle deck does not first disappear into the ship and then climb through internal ramps. It is guided upward from the start, while the lower deck keeps its own flow. It should be said that the Armas staff, both ashore and on board, is very friendly. Once the interaction moves away from barriers, rules and official uniforms, the whole process immediately becomes much more pleasant. On VOLCÁN de Tamadaba, passengers have access to decks 6, 7 and 8. Coming up from the vehicle deck, the ship first delivers deck 6. Toward the stern, this level opens into a 2-deck lounge with the bar at its center. The middle section of deck 6 is given over to reclining seats, which makes sense on a crossing of this length. Toward the bow, the ship changes character again. The cafeteria takes over a large 2-deck space. The forward part of deck 6 also has cabins. That makes sense, since the ferry is also used on overnight sailings. Deck 7, apart from the connected areas we have already seen, also offers more reclining seats. And then, of course, there are the outside decks. They are generously sized with plenty of space to step outside, slow down for a moment and get some Atlantic air. The pool, by the way, is empty. A few years ago, I still found working pools on Canary Island ferries. That seems to be quietly disappearing now. At least the pool is still here, which is something. At the time of filming, some deck areas show signs of overdue maintenance. From what I have seen since, at least some of that has already been addressed. And in fairness, anyone who knows ships will recognize the problem. Ships are, in principle, a rather unfortunate invention for the sea. Salt, wind, sun, vibration and humidity all take their turn. By the time one area has been treated, another one is already preparing its paperwork. A ship's life is basically a permanent campaign against decay, carried out with paint, steel, and a certain amount of optimism. These archive images are from 2013. At that point, VOLCÁN de Tamadaba was 6 years old. Her first documented service was between Tenerife and Lanzarote. According to one Spanish maritime source, she was also the ship that opened the regular ferry connection between the Canary Islands and Madeira, a line that Naviera Armas operated until 2012, then briefly revived for a few summers before letting it go again. But that was a long time ago. By now, the ship has worked her share of different routes and assignments, and she is no longer the young lady she once was. At close to 20 years, she is not really old either, just experienced. And she carries a few qualities that newer ships tend to leave out. My personal favorite is the generous deck space. Every corner offers something to discover and almost every angle delivers a new perspective for a camera.
personales de cada pasajero. Muchas gracias por su atención.
An empty and tidy quay is something every ferry captain likes to see, and the shipping company even more so. Now everything is in place, and the best part is that we are leaving right on time. This is the moment the main engines come to life. VOLCÁN de Tamadaba is powered by two Wärtsilä 12-cylinder diesel engines with a combined output of just over 23,000 kilowatts. That gives her a service speed of around 23 knots. Every departure is a small lesson in letting go. Ferries are particularly good teachers because they do it slowly. You have time to notice, time to think, time to realize that the island will stay exactly where it is, while the ship carries you somewhere else.
Bienvenidos a bordo. Por su seguridad, los planos que encontrará repartidos por el buque le mostrarán su ubicación, así como el camino a seguir en caso de emergencia. Recomendamos las lea con atención. En caso de duda, póngase en contacto con algún miembro de nuestra tripulación. Para su seguridad, es importante que comprenda el significado de cada uno de los siguientes símbolos.
On some ferries, the public address system is one of those things you only really notice when it does not work. Announcements turn into noise and instructions get lost somewhere between the speaker and the passenger. Here, the system behaves in a surprisingly civilized way. The speakers are clear, the voice is easy to follow.
Siga la dirección indicada en las señales y las instrucciones de nuestra tripulación. La alarma indica que debe acudir a su puesto de reunión.
The pilot boat is preparing to come alongside and pick up the harbor pilot. Pilots are often misunderstood. The pilot is not in charge of the ship, the captain is. The captain remains responsible for the vessel and for the maneuver. The pilot advises using local knowledge of the harbor, the depths, the currents, and the traffic patterns. That knowledge is valuable, but the responsibility stays where it has always been, with the captain.
Must be made through the indicated exits. The emergency alarms can be activated by... You will be able to see your location on the ship, nearest meeting points, and the route to reach them on the layout plans. The alarm means you must go to your meeting. In the eventuality of an alarm, you will hear an audible signal via the public address system consisting. Remember to dispose of any sharp objects such as pencils, keys, multi-purpose knives, blades. You must also board any life-saving equipment.
A last look back at Arrecife. The name comes from the Spanish word for reef, which is exactly what helped the place survive for centuries. The volcanic reefs offshore turned this stretch of coast into a sheltered anchorage, and that made it useful long before it became the capital. Ships could lie behind the rocks, find calmer water, and gain a little protection from weather and from people arriving with less commercial intentions. Lanzarote's airport is the third busiest in the Canary Islands. In 2024, it handled almost 9 million passengers. On an island with around 160,000 residents, that is more than 50 airport passenger movements per resident. That doesn't mean every inhabitant personally went on holiday 50 times, although the statistics do their best to suggest it. A large share of the international traffic comes from the United Kingdom and Germany, which explains quite a lot about the languages one hears on the beaches here. The airport is named after Cesar Manrique, the artist who argued so strongly against uncontrolled mass tourism and concrete holiday machinery. Today, his name sits on the building that delivers much of that machinery to the island. Time for lunch. There are two options on board, but one of them is currently closed. Unfortunately, I cannot find any information about the cafeteria opening hours. That is one of those small but persistent issues on some ferries. Opening times are often missing, leaving passengers with a practical choice. Wait indefinitely or settle for something less ambitious before the next counter closes as well. In this case, I head to the bar at the stern and pick up a sandwich. As it turns out, the cafeteria would have opened a few minutes later, a useful piece of information, just slightly too late to be of any use. No matter, a sandwich too can have its culinary charms, especially when seasoned with the quiet satisfaction of having made the wrong decision quickly and efficiently. The ship is now in the Bocaina Strait, the narrow channel between Lanzarote and Fuerteventura. To port, the north coast of Fuerteventura comes into view. To starboard, the southern edge of Lanzarote. At its narrowest point, the two islands are only about 11 kilometers apart. From a ferry deck, the strait can look more peaceful than it really is. Currents run through here and the trade winds are channeled between the two islands. The cafeteria service is now coming to an end. Had the sandwich been less convincing, I would still have the chance to try whatever they are serving over there. I think I saw meat, chicken and a few Spanish classics on the menu. A paella too, if my memory is not playing tricks on me. As it is, the sandwich has done its modest duty and the kitchen will close on schedule without my participation. A small culinary opportunity missed, accepted with the calm of a man who has already eaten.
Attention, please. We inform all passengers that in 15 minutes we will be ending our restaurant service. Thank you very much for your attention.
And there it is, Gran Canaria, the third largest of the Canary Islands, home to around 850,000 people. Almost half of them live in Las Palmas de Gran Canaria, the capital and by far the largest city. Gran Canaria is often described as a miniature continent, which sounds like marketing but is not entirely dishonest. On an island only about 50 kilometers across, the climate and landscape change with unusual speed. The north is greener, the south much drier. The center rises to nearly 2,000 meters, with peaks that occasionally see snow. The harbor we are now approaching is Puerto de la Luz, the largest port in the Canary Islands and one of the most important in the mid-Atlantic. The modern port began with the first stone in 1883. Las Palmas sits between Europe, Africa and the Americas, which made the harbor a useful Atlantic stopping point long before container logistics gave everything a spreadsheet. Christopher Columbus stopped at Gran Canaria in 1492 during his first voyage west, while his ships were being repaired in the Canaries. He returned on later voyages as well. Today, the port is connected with around 180 other harbors worldwide and handles roughly 1 million containers a year. It is also one of Spain's main bunkering ports, sometimes described as the gas station of the Atlantic, which is a useful reminder. Beneath the cruise ship glamour and the tourist arrivals, this is and always has been a working port. The pier we are heading for is the Muelle Nelson Mandela, named after the South African statesman. It is also home to the dedicated Naviera Armas terminal here in Las Palmas. The terminal became fully operational in 2019 and was described as the first privately financed passenger terminal in a Spanish state-owned port. The whole complex covers around 130,000 square meters, including the building, the operating areas and the ferry berths. Up to 5 ferries can be handled here at the same time. For passengers, the most useful detail is the system of elevated walkways connecting the terminal directly with the ships.
Atención, por favor, pasajeros con vehículo a bordo, pasajeros con vehículo a bordo, accedan al garaje.
And so a 6.5-hour crossing comes to an end. Arrival is at 17:30. I enjoyed this crossing a great deal. It was a real mix. Coastal sailing at the beginning, then a long stretch across what one can reasonably call open Atlantic. The ship was relatively empty today, with the focus clearly on freight. Maybe that is exactly why she felt so relaxing. Sitting by the pool, even an empty one, while the Canary Islands slowly pass on the horizon, has a particular kind of calm to it. It is one of the reasons I still prefer conventional ferries to fast catamarans.
Pasajeros y vehículos, el desembarque se efectuará por la parte trasera del buque junto a la recepción.
VOLCÁN de Tamadaba is no longer the youngest ship. A few areas on the outer decks were already being worked on, but overall she made a solid impression. The crew was friendly, the public areas were generous, and the whole crossing had that unhurried ferry character I had been looking for. Not the fastest way across the islands perhaps, but certainly one of the more civilized ones. Thank you very much for joining me on this crossing. The next one takes us a long way north to the ice-covered Baltic between Estonia and Finland. A complete contrast to the Canary Islands in just about every way. Until then, thank you for joining me on another day in paradise, at least for a ferry enthusiast.